Hello, Olsen Motorsports. We're installing today the LVJ Motorsports underhood relay box for Gen 2 Raptors. First step of this whole process is to remove the battery, which is pretty straightforward in this vehicle. There's a locking pin on the back side of the battery. Release that, take your terminals off. Always take your negatives off first. Reason being, you don't want to spark anything by taking the positive off first. It's also better for electronics. But once you take the battery out, it's kind of heavy, so make sure you have plenty of room to lift up. There's only a series of screws to release the battery tray, which isn't in the instructions, but I found it to be 1,000 times easier because one, you don't have shredding running around the engine bay. And second of all, you have the ability to maneuver the box to cut and do anything you want. So there's a series of screws and bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's a small Torx back here. Once those are done and you take the harness off the sides, this box literally comes out pretty easy. Now I'm going to set it down here on the floor next to the relay box, and this is what it looks like. It's a little tray, 6 individual relays, fuses. This one in particular has a diode board. Here's a switching to activate the relays. This is a ground connection. This is off a fuse, goes to the battery. And then you have your outputs, which I've already connected wires to. The reason why I use these wires is they're sealed. After all, under the hood, it's going to get wet. And everything about this is sealed. I've already organized them so that way I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 outputs. The other advantage to pins is you want to reconfigure how you're using them. You can simply take these apart and physically move where your pins go. It comes with 3 sets of bolts like this, but I found that because of the thickness of the box and the corrugated teeth, that I went with 2 additional longer bolts because these were just a little short for my taste. They show different diagrams or different ways. The manual suggests placing it all the way back here and cutting this connector off because it's just a dead plug. It doesn't actually belong to anything. But I decided to move forward just a little bit because it gives me a little more availability around the ground area or the neutral on the battery. This plastic's really soft. It works really well. It cuts really easily. If you're careful with a mat knife, you could probably cut it with a mat knife. I used a buzz tool, like a little portable sanding disc or a small grinder, and I literally just ground off the section that I needed. And because I had a pre-existing hole from where a harness plugged into, I used that as my basis to start my holes. So it lines up, and then I just marked my holes, drilled my other 2 holes for where I needed them to go. I actually did that backwards because this overhangs this direction, sorry. And then I can install my screws. I do the nuts going out because there's more room in the engine bay than in the battery compartment. They supply with a washer, lock washer, and then the nut. I just hand tighten those until I get the other 2 started. The nuts I used are a flat face washer. Gives me a little more room. Again, saves me more room in the battery area. But the cone helps me center up with the holes. And again, I just hand tighten it. Tighten it up now that you have them in. It is a little awkward because it's got some copper which has some weight and the steel. But once you get the first connector in, or first bolt tight, it stays pretty steady. So this is installed in the battery tray where it's flush to the front. It's not going to tip or move too much. And it's almost ready to reinstall back in the truck. So this is going to interface with the Switchpro 9100. So instead of using the factory switches, we're actually going to be hooking this into a Switchpro module. On this end, we're going to be using a Deutsch connector, which looks a little different than this, and I can show it to you when we're all said and done. Again, keep in mind any connectors that you're using underneath the dashboard, you want to try and find sealed connectors because it'll cut down the amount of corrosion and water damage that can occur. All these components are sealed tight. The main reason we're installing this is we have some additional lights on the front of the truck, and the Switchpro gives a couple of options that does a little more than just turn them on and off. And if you have premature wear on the relay devices, these are just singular modules, common used micro relays that are easily changed. Other components in the truck don't have that option because it's more of a switching device. This allows more amperage output, in other words, brighter lights, without damaging the physical switching that's activating your lights on and off. So there's a lot of benefits to installing this system. It's a very nice, compact, tight little system. And we'll show you just in a little bit once we get our connectors going. Here we are with our trigger wire with the Deutsch connector installed. One of the things that I like about Deutsch connectors is it's very easy to extract and replace the pins in whatever configuration you want. So if you thought that you had it in the right order, you pull the center pin, small screwdriver, and your pins come out. It's super easy. The downside of Deutsch connectors, the tooling is a little more expensive. But we're all set. We have our ground connection. We have our auxiliary outputs. We have our triggering sources and our battery section. Just like this. Make sure you don't scratch your paint. Should slide in. And this part's a little more complicated, only because you want to plug in before you go. But so now we've got all our points connected. Switching is there. We have plenty of lead wire. And it's just a matter of settling this back into the engine compartment. I'm a little short, so I have to use a step stool. Oh, it helps if I do it the right way. My soldering iron out of the way. But it's pretty simple. Everything's in. Make sure my wires are tucked where I want them to be. Make sure all my leads can come up. Make sure my battery is accessible. My battery leads are accessible. Now I just have to find my holes for the battery tray. Make sure no wires are underneath it, which I think something is. And there we are, we're setting in our holes. Next step is putting our screws back into place and then reinstalling our battery. Okay. Here we are with the LVJ installed, the battery's back in place, and it's a very neat and orderly install. Just want to thank you for watching. Like the video, subscribe to our channel. Please make any comments or suggestions. Check out the description for links to social media and product information. Thank you.